Yes, well, preterism is the notion, it really means pastism, Pastism, that the second coming, the parousia, the single second coming, has happened in 70 AD. That is utterly impossible. Anybody who believes in full preterism has not understood the gospel of the kingdom. The gospel of the kingdom predicts a time when Jesus comes back to rule the world with the saints. If you honestly think that you Christians are ruling the world from Jerusalem as from 70 AD, or that the resurrection of the dead occurred there, or that the saints of all the ages are ruling the world, you just haven't grasped some of the elementary facts about the gospel of the kingdom. So, to best verses, you simply say, all right, if the resurrection has occurred in 70 AD, show me. Actually, Paul labeled that a heresy. It's a striking and glaring error to say that the resurrection has already happened, which is what you're effectively saying if you think that the parousia happened in 70 AD, because the parousia, second coming, coincides with the seventh trumpet immediately after the great tribulation of those days. It cannot be AD 70. Did this happen? The sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from the sky. And then the next verse says, they will see the Son of Man coming in power and glory. That is the stupendous, the ultimate historical event coming. And it didn't happen immediately after the tribulation in 70 AD. So Matthew 24 is not that hard. If you'll bear in mind the question, Jesus was asked there in Matthew 24, Mark 13, he was asked about the sign of your coming, your parousia, and the end of the age. Now, I don't think Jesus necessarily knew times and the seasons. He said that in Acts 7. It's not for us to know. He didn't know. What he did know from Daniel was that there would be trouble, terrible trouble in Jerusalem, in the temple, immediately prior to the second coming. That much he knew. So looking out on those buildings, it wasn't clear at that stage whether those would be the buildings that would be followed immediately by the darkening of the sun. As it turns out now, we know those buildings were a shadow, if you like, a type, a similar thing, but not the actual buildings that Jesus was talking about. See, this is corporate thinking. Jesus also said of the Pharisees, you, Pharisees standing in front of me, killed Abel. They didn't. But in the Hebraic corporate way of thinking, the same brood of people grasp a totality way of thinking. Jesus was absolutely right.
We also recommend verse 3 in Matthew 24. Jesus is answering one question in two parts, if you will. The parousia, end of the age. One question with two parts, as
Right.
the Greek will
That's right.
tell
This
you
is
if you
one of them.
learn about the common Greek of the New Testament.
Hmm.
But what do you say, Anthony, to the preterist or historicist view that when Jesus talks about the end of the age in this context, he means something other than end of this present evil age?
Well, that's just very inadequate Bible study. What you do with a given phrase like the end of the age, sitelia to aeonos, you say, well, where does this expression occur in Matthew otherwise? And the other four occurrences of that phrase are obviously not AD 70. The harvest is the end of the age, Jesus said. And so the end of the age is what it always means in Matthew and other parts of the New Testament. It wasn't the coming of the Parousian kingdom in 70 AD. It was the exact reverse. It was the ruination of Jerusalem. And when Christ comes back, he's going to be busy restoring Jerusalem, the exact opposite of what happened in 70 AD. But the major point is that if you believe Daniel 7, you'll see that when the saints are ruling the world with Jesus, all nations are going to have to serve and obey them. If you really think that happened in 70 AD, I think you're reading history with a very poor slant. So I would rethink the whole of your eschatology for you to restore the kingdom to Israel. That, of course, was the right question. It's an insult to Jesus to say it was the wrong question. But John Calvin, who didn't understand this at all, said that question is a wrong question. There are more errors, he maintained, in that question than there are words. That simply tells you a lot about Calvin, who did not grasp this kingdom eschatology, to use the tough word, future things about the kingdom. Hadn't got a clue. I was published in the Evangelical Quarterly back in the 80s, I think, and I called the article Acts 1:6 and the Eclipse of the Kingdom. And I showed that commentaries are fearfully antagonistic to that question because the commentaries don't understand it. And therefore they think that the apostles must have been wrong. They weren't wrong. Jesus did not say you're wrong. He simply said it's not for us to know the time. The fact of the restoration of the kingdom is the whole point of the Bible. And at Pentecost, which was in a few days' time, not at a time unknown, but in a few days' time the Spirit came. So Pentecost cannot possibly be the restoration of the kingdom, and it wasn't. We're still waiting for that. That's why Joseph of Arimathea, in 3 of the gospel accounts, was still waiting for the kingdom of God. That was after the ministry of Jesus. Well, had he missed it? No, of course not. They're looking forward to the kingdom. We should be too. If you're praying, thy kingdom come, you're praying for a single event to come. May it come. The Greek has emphatic form of the coming word there. May it come. I mean, your kingdom. May it come. Not may it spread. And of course, there's a grand mistranslation in the King James in Luke 17:21, where it was translated very badly. The kingdom of God is within you. No. Modern versions correct that. The kingdom of God is not in your heart. You enter the kingdom. It doesn't enter you. Now, you could talk about the spirit of the kingdom now, the promise of the kingdom, training for the kingdom. All of that is going on now. But the kingdom itself, properly speaking, is that huge event by which the world will come under new management, and you, in God's gracious provision, are being trained now, called to get ready now through much tribulation, Acts 14:22.
I would also suggest you use Daniel 12:13. It says, but as for you, Daniel, go your way to the end, then you will enter into rest and rise again. That is, Daniel will be raised from the dead for your allotted portion at the end of the age. Yes. So there it is, end of the age, Matthew 24:3. So did Daniel the prophet raised from the dead in 70 AD? Also, you mentioned the other end of the age phrases in Matthew. So you have Matthew 13. The enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age. The reapers are angels. Did this happen? Once again, you can ask your opponent in 70 AD. Did God send angels, that is angelic, spiritual, non-human messengers, gather his people? Also in verse 49 of the same chapter. So it will be at the end of the age. The angels will come forth, take out the wicked from among the righteous. In 70 AD, as far as my history, knowledge of history is concerned, Anthony, the wicked were victorious. The Romans, they destroyed the temple. They dispersed the Jewish nation.